Thank you so much for joining us tonight for our COVID-19 vaccine town hall for children and families about making a family decision to get the COVID-19 vaccine. We're really excited to be here with you, and we're so fortunate to have an incredible panel of experts with us to talk about making a family decision about the COVID-19 vaccine. My name is Amy Freeman. I work in the Department of Population Health at NYU School of Medicine, and I co-lead the Community Health Worker Research and Resource Center. Like many of the organizations we work with, our center has been putting together webinars and town halls on the coronavirus and COVID-19 vaccine safety and distribution for the past year to bring trusted and reliable information to communities and frontline healthcare workers who serve them. We're co-hosting tonight's event along with the NYU Langone Vaccine Center, Harlem Congregations for Community Improvement, the NYU CUNY Prevention Research Center, the NYU Clinical and Translational Science Institute, and the NYU Community Engagement Alliance Initiative. So before I introduce tonight's moderator, I wanted to go over a few quick housekeeping items. If you can go next slide, please. So everybody's on mute, and we're currently live on the Harlem Congregations for Community Improvement Facebook page. The chat box is open for comments and sharing resources, so please use that. You can introduce yourself, make any comments or share resources, but if you have questions for the panelists, please use the Q&A box to submit them. That helps us keep track of them and make sure we get to as many questions as we can. So we will get to those questions after our panelists' presentations. The slides and recordings will be made available some point after the town hall tonight. And please do be sure to fill out our evaluation questions at the end so we know how to continue to provide information that's helpful to you. All right, let's get to it. Next slide, please. Oh, right. This is a quick agenda of tonight, which is basically what I just said. We'll have a few presentations and then a moderated panel discussion. Next slide. So I am very honored to introduce our moderator tonight. Dr. Malcolm Punter is the president and CEO of Harlem Congregations for Community Improvement, which was established in 1986. Harlem Congregations for Community Improvement, or HCCI, is committed to the holistic revitalization of Harlem. HCCI provides economic development and empowerment opportunities to help Harlem residents rebuild and sustain their community. Dr. Punter has been instrumental in leading HCCI's affordable housing initiatives over the years and has responded strongly during this pandemic to champion COVID-19 relief and education efforts for Harlem residents and beyond. Dr. Punter holds a doctorate in education, a master's of the science of law, an MBA in management and operations, and a BS in behavioral science. Thank you so much, Dr. Punter, for joining us.
Thank you, Dr. Amy Freeman. It is a pleasure to be here with our partners at New York University and its various departments, as well as I'll give a special greeting to our houses of worship, our faith community. As you may have heard, Harlem Congregations for Community Improvement is an organization with deep origins in the faith community of the Harlem neighborhood. And we're here today to partner with the NYU and other academic institutions to make sure that our community is educated, receives the facts about COVID-19, its vaccines, as well as its options for children and families. Tonight, you're going to hear from some esteemed experts in the field of immunology, vaccines, pediatrics, and people that are on the front line of trying to eradicate the COVID-19 pandemic in our community. I'm going to introduce those panelists to you now, and then we're going to hear a presentation from our panel expert, Dr. Mark Mulligan. So today's panelist is Dr. Mark Mulligan, who is the director of the NYU Langone Vaccine Center. Dr. Mark Mulligan has an extensive record of studies in vaccinations all over the world. And ACCI has a special relationship with Mark Mulligan because early on in the pandemic, he reached out to us and we partnered on educating the community. We're also joined by Dr. Christiana Nichols, who is a pediatrician in the Harlem community. So Dr. Nichols is on the front line of protecting and caring for the medical needs of our children. And we welcome Dr. Christiana Nichols here this evening. We're also joined by Miss Tanisha Carswell, who's a parent, a member of the NYU Patient Advisory Board, as well as NYU's Clinical and Translational Science Institute of the NYU Langone Health Center. We're happy to have them. And although you can't participate orally tonight, you will be able to enter your questions in the Q&A chat. And some of our registrants sent questions in advance, and we're going to do as much as possible tonight to answer all of your questions. However, we have limited time, and those questions we're unable to get to tonight, we'll endeavor to provide you with resources of frequently asked questions so that you could get the information that you seek. So without further ado, Dr. Mark Mulligan will present to us the science and the facts about the COVID-19 vaccine's impact on children and families. Dr. Mark Mulligan, welcome tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Punter. It's a real pleasure to be here. While I start speaking, and I'll share my screen as soon as I can, I'm getting a note that the host has disabled participant screen sharing. So Dina, if you're able to allow me to share my slides, that would be great. I'm just going to take about 5 minutes, and then I really want to get to the important time, which will be allowing my co-panelists to have their time, and then all of you who have questions. This is all about providing information and making sure you have all the facts so that you can make your best decision, as Dr. Punter said. And we have been working on this a while. I'll try to share again. Okay, now it's letting me. Just bear with me 1 second and I'll get started. All right, Dr. Punter, are you seeing my screen?
Yes, we are. Thank you, Dr.
Okay, great. So, I love the title, Families, What We Need to Know. I have a family, and it's certainly important to have the facts. Okay, let me see if I can advance. There we go. I wanted to just take a minute to let you know where I'm coming from as an investigator, as a doctor, a scientist. I'm at the Vaccine Center at NYU, and we were very honored last year when NIH named us just one of 10 nationally. These dots on the map are the 10 national vaccine and treatment evaluation units. And here we are. We're actually the only one in the city here. And we're part of the national effort to develop treatments and vaccines. And we've worked a lot on different treatments and vaccines for COVID. In doing this work, we've created 5 clinics across the New York City area. On First Avenue, we've got our NYU main site. We're at Bellevue Hospital. We're at the VA, also on First Avenue, Midtown Manhattan. And then we're at our Brooklyn site in Sunset Park, and then out in Long Island in Mineola. And, the vaccines are available for adults and for some children, ages 12 and older. And this is a little bit of a timeline and a look forward, because I know that many people are interested to know about the vaccines for children 6 to 11 and even younger. So we started working on vaccines in May of 2020. And amazingly, the first EUA, the first government approval for a vaccine, came in December 11th. And then a week later, that was Pfizer. A week later, Moderna got their approval. Let me get my pointer going here. And on December 18th. And then a couple months later, Janssen, or J&J, it can be called either Johnson & Johnson or Janssen, got their approval. So we have 3 authorized vaccines. And in May, a couple months later, Pfizer got the approval for 12 to 15-year-old children. They already had 16 and older, so they did have 16 and 17-year-old children. The FDA considers children anyone younger than 18. Moderna is still approved only for 18 and over adults, not yet for children, but they have filed for children 12 to 15. And J&J is studying the vaccine in children 16 to 17 and younger. So when will the children younger than 12, 6 to 11, have the opportunity to take a vaccine? Well, the latest we've heard is perhaps by early fall. The FDA is being very careful and asking the companies to expand the size of their trials. They're really wanting to make sure that this vaccine will be safe for those younger and perhaps more vulnerable children. Here's how we do pediatric, oh, sorry about that. Not sure what that is. My Siri thought I was talking to her. Sorry. I won't say her name again or she'll talk. Here's how we move from adults to children. We always start our new vaccine studies in adults because we want to be sure in consenting grown-ups that the vaccines are safe, tolerated well, and do what we think they should do in terms of protection. Then once we have that, we can start looking in progressively younger children. And usually there is a step down to younger and younger children. So we currently have approval, at least for Pfizer, for right here, 16, 17 and adults. And we're hoping maybe in early fall to have approval for 12 to 15. And then the children younger than that would be sometime later. So, that's where we are. And children remain at risk. And so I'm sure in our discussion, we're going to talk about what that may mean for families. Okay, let me see if I can advance my slide. At the Vaccine Center, we have a number of current studies. We're studying booster vaccines for people already vaccinated. We're studying COVID vaccines in pregnant people and their babies. We are looking at the vaccine response in people with weakened immune systems, those with autoimmune conditions who are on immunosuppressive drugs, or with cancer or HIV, or with a transplant and they're on a medicine to stop them from injecting their transplanted organ. I'll just mention two other kinds of vaccines. We are going ahead with a study for a new yellow fever vaccine. It's a mosquito-borne illness. And we're also starting a study on a flu vaccine that is a messenger RNA vaccine. So that's a really exciting, it'll be a first in human study. And this is just a schema of all those things, which I think I'm going to jump over right now. So I'm going to move towards ending my introductory remarks, mainly to say that I'm really glad you're here. I look forward to the discussion. I'm really looking forward to meeting my co-panelists. I've heard great things about them. And I hope that you'll ask very frank questions and that we can provide answers as best we can. I can guarantee you that you're going to hear from us a few times. We don't know that yet, but when we don't know, we'll sure let you know. So I'm going to stop sharing and turn it back to you, Dr. Punter.
Thank you, Dr. Mulligan. Let's ask Ms. Tanisha Carswell to introduce herself. Tell us why she's here and some of your background.
Thank you, Dr. Punter. My name is Tinisha Carswell. As previously stated, I am a member of the NYU Patient Advisory Council. I would like to thank NYU for creating this platform to allow our voices to be heard, questions to be answered. I'm truly honored to be a part of such an impactful cause. It's my pleasure to share my experience and my decision-making process on vaccinating my family. So I am currently a single mother. I have two teenage boys. One is 15 and one is 17. My 17-year-old, at the time, he was born with sickle cell anemia, very much compromised immune system. was not anything fighting off illnesses. His spleen stopped working by the vaccination. Never been a problem for me. COVID, when it first came out, I shared a lot of the sentiments that people have regarding whether it's something safe to do, the same questions, how did they develop the vaccine so quickly? But I am a science-based person. I base my decision-making on sciences. Science has carried my family thus far, especially with my son. Initially, when he was born 17 years ago, the prognosis for sickle cell anemia was 40. The sciences today, it has come so far. So it was a no-brainer for me when the vaccine came out. Myself and my son, Jaden, were actually vaccinated in March of this year. We had 0 side effects, actually. We completed our full vaccination by the end of March. And then it was my baby son, my 15-year-old Landon, who I felt, as a parent, I just felt I wasn't able to do enough to protect him because it wasn't approved to have him vaccinated at that time. So just like everyone else's lives have been impacted, their ability to socialize, going to school, those things, all of that stuff was hindered. Many nights of anxiety of just, how am I keeping myself and one of my children protected, but my other son is out there in the world. And despite him being a healthy child, no one person can say what COVID will do when you catch COVID. That's how I feel. And that is what sciences say, that is what statistics say. Like, yes, healthy children can catch COVID and be completely asymptomatic, but it also goes in the other direction. And it's the other direction that nailed it for me. It was the part that I just need to provide my family the best possible chance that if we do catch COVID, the best possible chance of living, of moving forward, of pushing through, to protect the family around me. I encouraged my extended family as well. My mother, my brother, many people in my family come from illnesses, lupus and diabetes. So I wanted to create an all-around environment, my neighbors, my children's friends. It wasn't just my family I was thinking about. Obviously, that is priority for me. But my decision-making process was completely based on the sciences. As of now, we are all vaccinated. We've had no issues. We are able to move a little more. We're able to see our families and feel comfortable when we step into homes of other people, knowing that we've done our part. And I like a lot of anxiety for me as a parent, it's lifted. And I'm absolutely here to answer any questions you may have, any further questions for me regarding my decision-making process. But I dealt with some of the same fears that some people may hold today. I'm just very grateful that I said to myself when we all got vaccinated, we made it, because so many people did not make it. So many people we lost did not make it to this point of having something to save our lives. And I managed to keep my children safe for a little over a year. And that was incredibly hard. It was incredibly hard. It was incredibly scary. First time I've ever dealt with a pandemic as such. So there was no one I could go to help me through it. And thankfully, I got us all through it, and we made it this far. And that's just a small piece of my story.
Thank you, Ms. Carswell, for that for that moving testimony. And I'm sure we'll hear more about how you and your family triumphed in your decision-making over the COVID-19 vaccine. So let's introduce Dr. Christiana Nichols. Dr. Nichols? Dr. Nichols, you're on mute.
Sorry, still getting used to Zoom after a year and a half. Thank you, Dr. Punter, Dr. Freeman, Dr. Mulligan, Ms. Carswell for inviting me to this webinar. I'm going to keep my presentation very brief because I know we have a lot of questions to get through. I am a general pediatrician working in a private practice in Harlem since 2008. I worked there with my dad, the other Dr. Nichols, where he's been there since 1980 something, something terrible, he would say. I wear a couple of hats in my professional life. I work in this in my Harlem office, but up until 6 months ago, I was working in the emergency room at Cohen Children's at Northwell, where I worked in the pediatric emergency room. And I was there during the early part of the pandemic, where our pediatric numbers were low enough that they actually redeployed those of us on the pediatric side to the adult side in the ER. So I worked in one of the COVID tents for 2 months, seeing the initial wave of the pandemic back in March and April, with these sick adults coming in from Queens and Long Island. And, you know, it was terrifying being there with so much we didn't know at the time. You know, was I going to bring some of that home to my family? Was I going to get sick? But throughout the whole year, this past year and a half, I have been working in our Harlem office, and you know, there I'm trying to help parents navigate this pandemic and the choices that they have to make in terms of remote schooling and vaccination. I also wear another hat. I'm a parent. I have 3 children who are 3, 7, and 11, and 2 of my children are in New York City public schools. And so we had to deal with remote schooling and hybrid and all the drama that all the other parents have had to deal with for the past year. We've also had COVID touch our family. My daughter had COVID, and we had other family members that were infected as well. So I hope that I can bring a different perspective as both a pediatrician, a parent, a mother of a COVID survivor, and just answer any questions and help people navigate this new normal, the phrase that I hate to use. And all the decisions and questions that we have going forward as to what's, you know, what would be most helpful for their families.
Thank you, Dr. Nichols. Thank you, Ms. Carswell. Thank you, Dr. Mulligan. We're going to commence with the question and answer period. The questions that we received and that were generated through our preparation are categorized into about 6 topic areas: vaccine access and requirements, a vaccine for pregnant people, questions about vaccine research and the vaccine development process, questions about risk and side effects, and questions about hesitancy and how does one make an informed science-based decision about whether to take the vaccine themselves, but particularly about whether the children your children are taking the vaccine. And then there's some general areas that I'll call miscellaneous that we'll get to as well. You know, I was very moved by the personal and professional stories of all of our panelists and experts. And I too am a parent, and my son, who's 13 years old, recently, actually this Saturday, got his 2nd dose of the Pfizer vaccine. It wasn't an easy decision for my wife and I, either. I was an early adopter, and my wife was hesitant, and she eventually came around. But we both were very skeptical about whether we were going to have our son get vaccinated. I absolutely didn't want to have him vaccinated during the school year because perchance there was a side effect or some risk. I didn't want to interrupt his already interrupted learning by the COVID process. I'm sure parents on this participating with us tonight have a myriad of concerns and questions, and we're going to get right to them. The first question, the questions that we received, some of the questions are from registrants, and what we're going to try to do is get to the registrant questions, the questions that were sent to us, and then the other questions that are not from the registrant questions. I won't mention where they're from. I will, unless they're registrant questions. And then you're also free to submit your questions in the Q&A feature of this webinar. So the first registrant question is in the category about research, and the panelists can jump right in as they feel qualified to answer the question. So registrant question number 1 is considering the Delta variant and the effects on youth, is there or will there be trials for children under the age of 12? So let's go with Dr. Mulligan on that question.
Yeah, the answer is yes. Those trials are ongoing. There are a number of studies ongoing for children under the age of 12. And the companies are developing variant-specific vaccines. We don't know if we need those yet. I think everybody's heard and learned that the current vaccines are highly protective against severe disease from Delta. Really, Delta is what we need to be thinking about. It's 80% or more in the country of the new cases now. But so, I think that the studies that are ongoing in children have become, by default, Delta studies, because Delta is what's out there now. So, we continue those studies. The scientific community will be putting those results together, and they will be, in essence, Delta studies. So yes.
Thank you, Dr. Mulligan. Dr. Nichols, would you like to comment on that?
I would just reiterate what Dr. Mulligan say. They are testing now for children, and I get asked that a lot. When are we going to be able to vaccinate our younger kids? And the timeline that I've heard, Dr. Mulligan probably know this more than I would, maybe it would be a Christmas present to everyone that we might have the vaccine for the lower age from 6 to 12 by possibly December, hopefully before the new year. If that is correct, Dr. Mulligan.
Yeah, it's kind of a up in the air thing. So I said earlier, I thought maybe by fall, but I think we're talking fall, winter, and it's just uncertain right now. As I indicated, FDA asked the companies to expand the size of their 5 to 11-year-old study to be extra sure. So that'll add a little time. We were thinking maybe by school start, but I think it'll be a little after that now.
So Dr. Mulligan, could you tell us, most of us don't understand what a study entails, and why does the scientific community come to the decision that it is safe?
Sure.
So we're talking about testing of the Delta variant and the vaccine for children. How many participants do you need to have? And what's the metrics to determining whether that vaccine is safe? Right.
So it starts with the adults, and the vaccines have been extremely safe there. I think we recognize that. And once they have been shown to be safe in adults, and I would point out that we have the clinical trials experience where, a few 100,000 people got vaccines across the 3 big trials that led to the EUA approvals. But now an additional 4 billion doses of vaccines have been given on the planet. It's pretty amazing. So there's a huge post approval for use experience, and all of that is there in adults and is telling us, okay, it's reasonable to take these to children now. And so, Dr. Punter, usually the children's studies don't have to be as big as the adult studies. They can sort of borrow safety information from the adults. So they're usually maybe about 5,000 kids in each study. The FDA recently asked the companies to double those 5 to 11-year-olds trials to about 10,000 kids to have an extra level of confidence in the safety for our kids. So now those are ongoing. And again, there's very careful scrutiny after vaccination. In general, if there's going to be a problem with a vaccine, it happens in the first few weeks or the first month or two. So after a couple of months, we can feel pretty comfortable that this is looking good. Now, one thing that people have probably noticed, once the vaccines are authorized after being studied in tens of thousands of people, then they go out and now we have tens of millions of people. And you do sometimes learn about some extremely rare side effects after vaccines are taken out into the community. And how do we address that safety aspect? It's really what doctors always do. We think about the balance of benefit to the balance of harm potential.
Sure. Thank you for that.
And that balance thus far, and I'll wrap up, Dr. Punter, that balance thus far has weighed very heavily on the side of doctors recommending these vaccines for all adults, for the children that they're currently available for, and hopefully for younger kids soon.
So a follow-up question is that children are required by policy to take a number of vaccines, right, during the course of their childhood. Does the COVID-19 vaccine interact negatively with other vaccines? And Dr. Nichols?
No, so there was initially a recommendation from CDC that there be 2 weeks in between COVID vaccine and our routine vaccine schedule, the regular teenager vaccines that we give, but that recommendation has been changed recently in the last month or so, where there does not need to be a spacing in between vaccines. So we could give COVID one day and then you can get your regular routine shots the next day, which is what's happening in my office, where all the teenagers are coming in for their pre-college physicals. And I encourage them to go get a COVID shot right before they're going to school if they haven't already. So as of now, there hasn't been any interactions reported between the routine vaccines and COVID vaccination.
Thank you. Dr. Mulligan, could you explain what an interaction is and what signs we should be looking for in case?
Yes, theoretically, you could propose that giving two together might cause some unforeseen problem. It might be a high fever or something like that, or some discomfort in the body. But that's not been seen thus far. There have been some studies in adults giving on the same day the flu vaccine and the COVID vaccines. We're starting to see a number of those because for adults, that's going to be, the sort of conceptual equal to what Dr. Nichols just talked about in kids for their routine childhood and adolescent vaccines. And thus far, giving vaccines together on the same day in adults has been just fine. So we're not seeing any of these theoretical problems of giving the vaccines together.
Thank you. Ms. Carswell, what should be the conversation when a family member is vaccine hesitant? And what should be the approach to change their mind as a parent and person closely associated with NYU studies?
Punter, so for me personally, it's may sound simple, but regret. I don't think I could ever forgive myself if I would not have afforded my kids the best possible chance of survival. I would not have afforded my family if I chose to not vaccinate myself. I don't really like to use the term anti-vaxxer, but if I chose to not get the COVID vaccine, and I potentially was the cause of causing something irreversible, I wouldn't be able to live with that. And also, you know, I want to continue creating memories with my family. I want to be around my family, my children, to be around my extended family with minimal worry. I'm not going to say, you know, all of your worries go away, but COVID-19 shut the entire world down. It's factual. So a large part of my worry went away when a vaccine became available. So my suggestion would be to just speak from the heart and talk honestly about, you know, what the vaccine means to you and what a person not being vaccinated, whether it's a sibling or a child, and being around others and being around yourself, like what that impact could possibly have on you. I experienced something several months ago with a very dear friend of mine who visited my home, and again, myself and my older son is vaccinated. And we were just hanging out together. We were together for several days, and, you know, her and I, we both have allergies, and we thought, you know, it's allergy season. And it actually turned out that she in fact had COVID. And I will say, myself and my son were almost 2 weeks into the second vaccine, and we did not test positive at all. But that waiting period for me, I physically made myself sick because I was wondering if something was going to turn up in my household. And then I was also thinking, you know, is this vaccine really doing what they say it's going to do? And no, that vaccine really did for my family what they said it was going to do, and even more. So the vaccine never says, you know, they haven't put out that you're not going to catch COVID. But in my case, we did not catch COVID. But had we not been vaccinated, I don't know what could happen. I'm relatively healthy, but I know that my son is not. So I made the best possible decision. And these articles you read, you know, the really scary ones that come out every single day, and people think this won't be me. This won't happen to me. The same exact people that it happened to had the same thought. So I would just say, go with the sciences. And I keep going back to that, but we live our lives based on the sciences, whether you have a long-term ailment, whether you have heart disease, whether you have diabetes, you are taking medication to live. It's not curing you. It's affording you the ability to function and to live. And for me personally, this vaccine is similar, just like the medication I have to give my son. My son has to take chemo every day for sickle cell and folic acid, and he took penicillin until he was 5. 5 years of his life, penicillin every day to sustain his life. So for me, the vaccine falls along the lines of the same. So that's what my advice would be. It would just be to, again, have a heart to heart and really value and take into consideration the statistics and what science is affording you.
Thank you, Ms. Carswell. Dr. Nichols, I know as a pediatrician, your job is part science and part art. How do you talk to parents, you know, in the way they can understand the importance of vaccinations, and how do you combat hesitancy and misconceptions in your practice?
That's a great question. So, you know, I make a distinction between an anti-vaxxer who I'm probably not going to make a lot of headway with, to the vaccine hesitant, where they have real and legitimate questions about vaccines, especially COVID vaccine. This is a brand new vaccine, and there is a lot of perceptions and misconceptions about this vaccine owing to, and this goes back to historical inequities, which include information gaps. Not everyone has access to good, solid information. Not everyone has access to medical people that they trust, that they can interact with and ask real questions. And, there's a lot of misinformation bouncing around the internet, and depending on your sources, you might come in with a lot of preconceived notions and just wrong information about the vaccine. So I try to approach this as, first I try to present the information that I know. I talk about my own initial hesitancy. I was a little nervous getting the vaccine. I had access to the vaccine first week of January, actually December, but I actually got it the first week of January, and I was nervous. I said I didn't know enough about this technology. I didn't know the vaccine, but the more I read about it, I learned that this technology has actually been around for more than a decade, and it was technology that they were trying to use for previous variations of the coronavirus. And so this wasn't something that they invented in the last year. It was something that they've been working on for some time. And it was fortunate that the COVID-19 virus works very well with that existing technology. I try to also bring it home to how does this affect them personally. There's this idea, especially with the young parents, that they are not as at risk as their grandmothers, the grandparents, the aunties, and what have you. And I just point out that the COVID infection is skewing younger and younger, and that they are at risk and that their children are at risk. And I bring up my child. I have an 11-year-old who she was my athlete. She's very healthy, and she has had COVID twice. She had COVID in March, and she had COVID again in December. And in between that time, she had some long COVID symptoms. We've seen cardiology, pulmonology, the whole 9 yards. And it was a very, very scary time. She's much better now, but I wouldn't wish that on anyone else's child. And so I just try to bring up my personal experience, and that she turns 12 in October, and the day after her birthday, she'll be getting her first vaccine. But it's just countering misinformation and hesitancy about the vaccine, just based on sometimes a lack of good knowledge. I just try to fulfill that.
Thank you so much. Dr. Mulligan, is the vaccine for children similar to the adult version of the vaccine, mRNA? This is a live question from our audience.
Hi, Malcolm. First, I just want to correct something. I think I said earlier, I didn't speak correctly about the age ranges. We do have 16 and up initial approval, and we also have 12 to 15 now. So I'm sorry if I misstated that. The vaccines are the same. We're still, the scientists and doctors that are doing the trials are still looking at the possibility of lower doses. But right now, the vaccines that are used are the same. For the younger kids, they're looking at some of the lower doses, but the same vaccine. So a smaller amount, given their smaller body size. But the kids that are 12 and up are getting the same thing.
So one of our audience members asserted that pericarditis has been one of the side effects for the COVID vaccine for children. Could you elaborate, Dr. Mulligan or Dr. Nichols? I hope I said that correctly.
You were close. Pericarditis, it's hard. I have trouble with it. I'll go first quickly and then let Dr. Nichols follow. The way I view this is that this is one of those things that didn't show up in the 10,000, 40,000 person trials. And then when the vaccines got out to 1 million people, and particularly when they were starting to be used in the younger groups, it showed up, but it's extremely rare. It's in the range of 1 in a million, 1 in 100,000. And it happens mostly in younger boys, and they in general do quite well with it. So I think you have to use that idea about sort of relative risk. Right now, in the middle of a pandemic, absolutely, doctors, nurses, nurse practitioners, PAs feel that the vaccine benefit greatly outweighs any rare risk of a possibly serious side effect. So we have to admit that these things may occur. We don't fully understand why that is, but they are so rare that I would try to explain to people that this should not interfere with them taking the vaccine.
That question regarding pericarditis and more often myocarditis, it comes up a lot when I'm talking about the vaccine with the parents. And if they don't bring it up, I bring it up so that I feel like I've given them all the information I can. So just so people know, so myocarditis is an inflammation of the muscle of the heart. This can be caused as a common side effect in many viral infections, especially COVID infection. The symptoms of myocarditis are chest pain, shortness of breath, a fast, rapid heart rate. So they have found that following the second dose of COVID vaccine, that there were these cases reported more commonly in males. I think the ages were from 16 to 24, 16 to 30, and it was usually within a few days of receiving the second dose of their mRNA vaccine. What usually happened with these patients is that they would present to their physician or to the emergency room, they would have chest pain, and they would get worked up and show that they were having signs of inflammation of the heart. The vast majority of these kids were admitted, observed, and discharged, and have since recovered fully and have had no long-term issues. Don't quote me on the number. I believe the number of cases was somewhere maybe 320, 350 cases, which sounds like a lot of people. And obviously you don't want to be any of those 320, but I think it's always important to remember the denominator, that this was 320 cases out of, I believe, 50 million doses given to people 12 to 29 years old. So no, you don't want to be one of those 320, but 50 million people got both shots, did well, and are living their best life vaccinated. So going back to just measuring risk, you have to say, is this very small risk of this potential side effect, it's far less than the benefit of having vaccination. It is a known thing that you can get myocarditis from COVID infection. And there have been other studies that showed even like one out of 40 people in one study had signs of myocarditis versus these 320 cases. So I just present sort of those facts just to say the risk benefit ratio of the vaccine versus the benefit is very clear.
I think that was very helpful. We have a live attendee who says they suffer from pulmonary arterial hypertension, but despite that, they could not themselves wait to be vaccinated. They were anxious to be vaccinated, but they now want some suggestions on how to talk to their children. Is there anything that they can do to convince their children that the fact that they successfully were vaccinated, that this might be an option for their children. Tanisha, you want to take that? Since you've had experience with the preconditions.
Yes, absolutely. So initially, I'll be honest, when I did mention it to my 15-year-old, he did not want to take the vaccine. However, my situation doesn't seem to be the same as the panelist that put the question in. It took very little convincing for me to change his mind. It was basically exactly what I spoke to a little earlier, just protecting himself, protecting his brother, myself, friends and family. And believe it or not, my children, I'm assuming they may get together with their friends because they're very educated on COVID. So we would have dialogues together about it, and they would have lots of questions about it. But mom, I'm healthy. One of my kids, I'm healthy, and they say a lot of children get it and don't even know that they have it. And I share articles with them. I mean, I don't do it to scare them. I do it because it's reality. When I see an article that touches me, I keep them in the know. And there has been times that I've had to be raw and maybe share information with them, just to be completely transparent. Don't ever think that you're invincible and, something can't happen, right? So we're going to do what we need to do as a family to make sure that we're all protected. And again, just have conversations of the heart. That's how I managed my entire family, because even my mother was quite skeptical, and she is diabetic. She has had 2 heart attacks. She has lupus, and just skeptical, and does not read the news. The news depresses her, does not read the news. And I just kept pushing and pushing and pushing. And I literally got my entire family from New York all the way to Atlanta, just giving them information and sharing knowledge and just having heart to hearts, and literally just like, mom, you won't come to my house. You will not see your grandkids. I don't want to do this, but I can't live with myself if I know I could have prevented something from coming into my home, because you are choosing, and everyone has the right. You are choosing not to do this. So I had to set a lot of boundaries. And it worked for me. I'm not saying it'll work for everyone, but I would say, don't give up and keep pushing. And even if you're redundant, keep sharing articles, keep sharing your feelings. And yeah, just keep going. Don't give up. It wasn't easy for me in the beginning, but we did make some headway as a family.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we're actually at 5 minutes time. So I'm going to ask the last question from the attendees' questions posted. Dr. Mulligan, what is the difference between the emergency use authorization and FDA approval? And it appears, at least in many people's perception, that the FDA approval is taking too long, or taking a long time. Could you explain the nuances of those approval processes and maybe dispel some of the myths and misinformation regarding that?
Sure. The vaccines currently have an authorization, but not full licensure. And they are authorized because we're in a very serious public health emergency. And so even though licensure has not been granted, FDA has said that to help us combat this virus, we're going to go ahead and authorize the use of these while we move towards licensure. And typically that requires 6 months of safety data, all the information about protection, and the information about manufacturing. It's a lot of technical information from the factories where the vaccines are made, a lot of paperwork, documentation. I suspect that the FDA is going over everything very, very carefully. I actually agree with the panelist or the questioner that it's taken too long. I also agree with, I think, another comment in the chat box, which was that it almost seems that, you know, if they could license this sooner rather than later, that would help us, because having the full licensure, I think, may give some people an extra layer of confidence. And I certainly agree with that. And I wish they would do that. You know, I've actually thought we would have had it by now. I think it's probably imminent. You know, if you do look at the news, you see that, you know, you're starting to hear from various groups that this needs to be speeded up if it's at all possible. Of course, as for the whole process, we don't want to bypass any safety checks. On the other hand, we sure want to be efficient with our time and with our approval.
Thank you, Dr. Mulligan. Dr. Nichols, any closing remarks?
I wanted to sneak one last, I saw on the Q&A, people have been asking why are people still getting COVID infection despite being vaccinated? And I think it's important just to understand what the purpose of vaccination is. The vaccines are not there to completely prevent COVID infection. They are there to prevent you from being hospitalized or to have severe illness. So you can get breakthrough infections. That doesn't mean that's a failure of the vaccine. That means the vaccine did its job. Most of the people with the breakthrough infections had a sniffle, or they had what they thought were allergies, or they thought they had a small cold, which is actually a problem because some of them aren't getting tested because they don't realize that they are positive. But that is the whole point of vaccination, is just stopping this hospitalization and stopping the severe illness that can go on to long COVID and other sequelae of this infection. So I hope that these breakthrough, you know, and I hesitate to even call them that, but I hope that these breakthrough infections that are getting a lot of press, that shouldn't keep people from getting vaccinated. That's exactly why you should get vaccinated, because it will keep what could be a deadly infection to just a cold, an inconvenience.
Thank you. Ms. Carswell, any closing statement?
Thank you, Dr. Punter. No, I would like to thank everyone for attending. Your questions were great. It was an honor for me to share my experience. I do hope that it has touched some people. It has educated you, has given you something to take back to your families, a little strength, some real time, just what is actually occurring in someone's life. I'm speaking to you as a parent who has had all the anxieties, who has a healthy kid, who has one that is not. And it was an honor. It was an honor to be on this panel and to speak with all of you. And thank you again for joining.
Thank you. Dr. Mulligan?
Yes, thank you, Malcolm. I've enjoyed being here tonight. I just wanted to close with a couple of comments about where I think we are with Delta. Delta is highly infectious. Delta we don't know this for sure, but it may cause somewhat more severe disease. We're still trying to sort that out, I think, as a community of scientists and physicians. And people who are vaccinated can become infected. As we just heard from Dr. Nichols, that's okay. Most of our viral vaccines don't prevent infection, they prevent disease. So that's fine. We expect that. And the vaccines were never perfect anyway, but we may be seeing a few more breakthrough infections than we saw. But that should not dissuade anybody from getting the vaccine. They're still doing their job, as Dr. Nichols said beautifully. I think it's a little bit of an unknown time. We should be humble. We should err on the side of caution. I think for families, I have 2 children and 3 grandchildren, and my children are vaccinated. My grandchildren are too young. I think for families, we all have to think about where we are and erring on the side of caution, being careful. And I do think masks are coming back into our lives again. You know what? We can do this. It's never going to be as bad again as it was last year, but we can make it through this and get to a better place. But the key is going to be vaccination for everybody. We really need everybody to take the vaccine. So I recommend it. As a doctor, I recommend all of you out there that aren't vaccinated, that are eligible to get a vaccine, please take the vaccine.
Thank you to everyone who attended this evening. This has been the COVID-19 Vaccine Virtual Town Hall for Children and Families. On behalf of our partners at NYU and our sponsor, Harlem Congregations for Community Improvement and its board of directors, thank you for joining us. Dr. Amy Freeman will close us out with some final remarks.
Thanks so much, Dr. Punter, and to all of our panelists. This has been a really excellent, just interesting panel and discussion. I hope our audience has found it helpful. Just thank you again to everybody for participating and the various organizations involved. We do have a quick poll if people want to stick around and do it. I don't know, Dina, I just said maybe we shouldn't do it, but if folks want to stick around, we have a poll just to get a sense of whether you think it's helpful. It helps us figure out, whether we're on the right track providing these webinars. But thank you again, everybody, for attending, and we'll be sending out the recording and slides as they become available.